Okay. You're listening to newstreamingnetwork.com, home of goingsolomedia.com and WGSN-DB, Going Solo Network Radio's podcasts and TV. Welcome to the Divorce Coalition Live, a show designed for divorce professionals to enhance the divorce process to prevent re-traumatization of domestic abuse survivors. I'm your host, Jill Kaufman. I'm a therapist, a divorce coach, and co-parenting expert. You can get in touch with me at info@divorcecoachjill.com, and my website is divorcecoachjill.com. The Divorce Coalition is a nonprofit organization dedicated to increasing education and awareness of divorce professionals and process change to create a more supportive and less traumatic divorce experience. We have united top podcast hosts and divorce professionals to create systematic change in the divorce process for domestic abuse victims. With 23.5% of divorces citing domestic violence as a cause, we bring you expert guests, practical advice, and enlightening conversations. Knowledge is power in creating change in the world of divorce with domestic abuse. So, without further ado, let's get started. When a DV survivor is going through divorce, it's critically important that they know how to navigate the court system. Divorce professionals can play a role in helping domestic violence survivors navigate the court system and find support as they go through divorce. Today, I'm asking my guest, Penelope Hefner, to share her expertise as to how. Penelope Hefner was born in Athens, Greece, but grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, where she currently resides with her family. She became a family law attorney in 2007 and is particularly passionate about the rights of children going through the separation of their parents. She often serves as a guardian ad litem, representing the best interests of children, as well as a parent coordinator, serving as a referee in high conflict cases. In her free time, Penelope loves to travel the world with her husband and 4 boys. Welcome, Penelope.
Hi, thank you.
And it's okay if I call you Penny?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great, Penny. So tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do.
So, as you noted, I've been a family law attorney for about 17 years now, and initially did a couple of other different areas of law, but from the beginning have had a particular focus and passion for family law. And for me, the biggest driver in that is the well-being and rights of the children that are involved in separation and divorce. I have a lot of empathy for the adults that go through the process, but they have, in most situations, at least some autonomy and some decision-making ability in the process where the children often do not. So I found myself early on in my career focusing on the areas that overlap with the kids, as I said, which would be custody, child support, serving as a guardian ad litem / best interest attorney, as it's really more known as, and a parent coordinator. Again, all of that with the mindset of trying to make decisions or help my clients make decisions that put their kids first in this process.
I love that. I am aligned with you completely and focused on protecting children. So I think that's amazing that you are, as an attorney, that is your passion. So how are domestic violence cases normally addressed by the court?
I would say the court, regardless of kind of what state or jurisdiction you're in, as a general rule, I think tries to do their best in a situation where there really aren't enough resources and there isn't enough time to really approach a domestic violence situation like ideally we would want it to be. So particularly in North Carolina, which is where I practice, I know that judges absolutely do their best to give people that come before them the opportunity to be heard and to make a decision that ideally protects everyone involved. But the reality is that every county in which we practice, which is a lot of them in North Carolina, is growing. And there is a high demand and there's not a lot of, as I said, resources, which means there aren't enough judges that are able to do domestic violence court. And particularly in some of our counties, we have a dedicated domestic violence courtroom and judges dedicated to that. And that's nice, but that's not true for all counties and jurisdictions. Some of them have to have it mixed in with whatever judge is able to hear it. But regardless of that, there aren't enough judges anywhere. I don't think anyone is over there saying we have too many judges, so there aren't enough judges, which means time is limited, court personnel is limited, and oftentimes patience is limited. These judges are hearing so many cases in a day. It could be anywhere from a handful to 20 cases like this just in one day when people are coming to them on an emergency basis and asking for help and support. And I'm sure, just like any human being, when the first person comes to you, you maybe have some more patience. The second one, by the end of the day, you're tired, you're exhausted, you've heard a lot of valid cases, and then you've heard some cases that maybe shouldn't be in front of you. So I think frustration grows.
So a question about what you just said. The dedicated judges who are working with domestic violence cases, how is that better for domestic violence survivors?
So when people become judges, and it varies from state to state, whether they're elected or whether they're appointed, but there's no kind of universal requirement of what it takes to be a judge, other than having been a licensed attorney. And again, that's for district court judges and up. That's not even the case for magistrates or some other positions that may exist. So there's not a lot that goes into it. There's not necessarily this automatic years of experience or areas of experience. And what we find is that there is a huge learning curve, just like there would be for anything else. Think of the scenario where someone has not practiced for that long, but even think of somebody that's done nothing but civil litigation their entire career. They become a judge, and now they're being placed in family court or in domestic violence court. So there's this huge learning curve. And I think that a lot of places do their best to educate a judge very quickly. But remember the backlog that I talked about. They can't really say each new judge gets, a year of training before they have to do what they have to do. They basically get thrown into it. So having dedicated domestic violence courtrooms and judges just means that those judges have been able to somewhat specialize in that, have heard a lot more cases in a shorter amount of time, and have learned quickly what works and what doesn't. And I think that makes them more efficient and better able to serve than the judge that might come across a domestic violence case every once in a while when they're in that rotation. Practice makes perfect.
So can you give an example of how that, a judge would handle it with the education and experience versus without?
Yeah, I think that the judges with education and experience are able to sort through the people that really have an emergency situation and the people that are trying to use that courtroom for leverage or for some type of advantage in the rest of their family law case. So the judges that have experience know the questions to ask, know the reaction that they're looking for or expecting or not expecting, and are able to really cut to the issue and find out if what the person is seeking is truly sincere and about domestic violence and not about anything else. I think when you don't have the experience, it can take a lot longer to figure that out.
That's a great example. I appreciate that. Thank you. So what generally happens if you have a trial on your domestic violence case?
So at least in North Carolina, and like I said, this applies to a lot of jurisdictions, but the first step is to seek that protective order on an emergency basis, which usually means it's just that person showing up with the judge and the clerk and whatever courtroom personnel. And depending on the outcome of that, if that is granted on what we call an emergency or ex parte basis, then it would be set for a more formal hearing. And again, I think that applies in most places. At that formal hearing, it really is the responsibility and the burden of the person that's seeking the protective order to meet all of the elements of whatever that statute requires and to convince the judge of that. Now, that typically is happening with the abuser. They're in the courtroom present with their attorney. And in a lot of cases, unfortunately, there is this disparity in financial means in those situations often. So what we see a lot is that the abuser, the alleged abuser, however you want to think about it, the person that's being accused is there oftentimes with a very big, bad attorney that costs a lot of money, that is there with the mission of protecting their client and really no one else in the process. And sometimes the person that is the victim has counsel and they're able to, to be represented in a way that helps their case. And other times they're just not. They either get ineffective counsel, somebody that's brand new, somebody that doesn't do that type of work, but they're willing to do it, quote, as a favor or to help out. And sometimes their mistakes are not for any ill intent, but they just don't know. And they don't know how to navigate the process. And equally bad is when they're not able to have any counsel. And so they're there representing themselves. And I think it's very unfortunate when someone that's a victim of domestic violence is not able to get the representation and therefore the outcome that they need simply because they don't know the rules of play. They don't know the laws. They don't know the rules of evidence. I see a lot of people in that position saying things like, Judge, I would like to show you these photographs if you let me, or Judge, I have plenty of witnesses that I can bring another time. And that may not sound unusual to anybody outside of the court system, but for those of us that know, we're all sitting there cringing and thinking, this is your moment. This is your trial. You have to show everything and you have to show it in a certain way. And the rules of evidence are not designed to hurt people, but they are designed to keep the process fair to everyone involved. But not knowing how that works can really be a detriment.
So how, if the partners are married, how does one partner get access to an attorney and the other one doesn't?
Well, I think that comes with what we are learning about, especially in the legal world, about financial abuse. So there are plenty of people that are married, and it doesn't mean that that person is not entitled to those assets or a share of those assets, or that they're not entitled to support in some form, whether it be spousal support or child support. But if the other person, the abuser, is intent on controlling that or putting them at some type of limitation or disadvantage, they do it. And they do it by controlling access to those accounts and not sharing online passwords and information. They do it by having mail sent somewhere else. They do it by going into the financial institution and saying something like, oh, I just want to move this money to another account. And that's not necessarily going to be a red flag for the financial institution. So they do it in a multitude of ways. And then when the time comes, the spouse that's at the disadvantage is scrambling, trying to figure out what happened. The money is gone. They may have been removed from a credit card. They may not have any credit or ability on their own to get credit because they haven't been employed, or they're employed on a part-time or limited basis. And they come to an attorney and we explain to them what the laws are and that we can take steps to get them whatever it is that they're entitled to by law or that they're seeking. But that's not going to happen overnight. So one of the frustrations, I think, for attorneys that are in the domestic violence arena is that, at least in places like North Carolina, there's not emergency support. There's not, can we get some support to the person while they're going through the domestic violence part of the case, and then we can sort it out later. There are other places, from my understanding, that, like in Florida, there is something like that, that people can get that in the short term, and then it can be dealt with later on, because there will be situations where maybe people haven't been honest and maybe they weren't entitled to that support. But I think other places maybe look at it like they'd like to err on the side of caution and make sure that the person that is asking for support gets it. But that's just not the case everywhere. And there's a lot of places where they're like, we'll get you support when the time comes, but we're going to go through these steps first.
That's very hard to hear and frustrating. And I just wonder, do you think that the judges who are, have experience in domestic violence look at the two people, one having representation and the other not? Don't they see that there's something wrong there?
I think as human beings, they might see it, but the law doesn't allow for a whole lot of personal opinion and feeling and empathy. So they really can't use someone's representation or lack of representation for or against anything. I think where the judges with experience can be really helpful is that they are not as reluctant to challenge the person with the attorney. They're not as reluctant to maybe they can't give legal advice, but to maybe say, I don't know if you've given this thought. I don't know if you want to be represented. If you do, we can hold the case open. We can continue it. Like, again, they're limited in what they can do. They can't say, hey, I see that you're hurt. I see that you need help. You should call so-and-so. They can't do that ethically. But I think the ones that are more experienced kind of know that they're willing to, within the rules, within what they're ethically allowed to do, give at least the opportunity to someone that seems to be struggling in their case, but clearly needs the help, the opportunity to do that.
That would be very important, I would think.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's say they go to trial. What happens if you win versus if you lose? Like, what happens in those circumstances?
So that's the big question. And that's what I spend so much time counseling my clients on, because at the end of the day, if they win and they're successful, what they have is a piece of paper, a pretty powerful piece of paper, but they don't have a bulletproof shield, which means they are still going to have to be very careful and very on alert. And they're going to have to do something that they probably haven't done their entire relationship, which is hold the other person accountable and put up those boundaries. And if they see things that are violations of the order, that they actually report that. And that can be really hard for them to do. It's like hard for them to even go in and step foot in the courthouse to start with. And now you're saying you need to be part of the enforcement team. That's not a great place to be in. And if they get it, I would say that the other side in a situation of real domestic violence is not going to say, oh, that's great. I understand now. What I did was wrong and I need to get help and I need to leave this person alone. That's not usually the reaction, right? So again, their guard has to be up and they need to be thinking about what the next thing and the next thing and the next thing is that they need to do legally and financially to protect themselves. And that doesn't, again, leave a lot of room for them to do some self-reflection, healing, get help, get trauma, get therapy, whatever that is. There's not a lot of time that we as the attorneys can give to our clients or that the clients can give themselves to get caught up on the emotional and mental side of it while the case continues to go on. If they are denied the protective order, which unfortunately sometimes happens in situations where it probably shouldn't, then they're in a really bad position, right? Because now they don't even have that layer. It's not a great layer, but it's a layer of protection. They don't have it. The other side has now essentially been provoked. They're not happy still that this is going on, even if they quote won. And then there again, that person is going to have to be thinking, what do I do next? What can I do next? I've got this very angry, very frustrated person on the other side who is now probably going to want to punish me. And if they can't punish me physically or in person or emotionally or whatever it is, they're going to try and do it through the litigation process.
Yeah, that's really daunting. What do you have any advice for people?
So usually what we say, and again, I think this applies to anybody that regardless of what jurisdiction you're in, that there is some level of preparation that has to happen. And we say there's everything from just, if it means that you've got to kind of circle the wagons and see who can help you financially, who can help you to at least have some initial funds to get a retainer to an attorney. And even if you can't do that, let's say you're in a situation where even that amount of money is just insurmountable, getting together something where you can at least have a consult with an attorney so they can tell you where you're living, what the rules are that apply, what you need to do, not do. We try and do even just a crash course, like make sure if you have to go to court on your own that you think about A, B, and C, that you're prepared for X, Y, and Z. And even that can be huge. A lot of times we at Sodoma Law try to do when the circumstances fit. We can't help every single person. We know that. But where the circumstances fit, if we need to do it on a pro bono or free basis from time to time, we do that. It's just a matter of some screening, right? Like we need to know who really needs our help, and we do that when it's appropriate. And there are plenty of other attorneys in this area and beyond that would do the same thing. At least a touch point to be able to say, here are the big things you need to keep in mind. It won't substitute for great counsel, but at least it's something. So I tell people, do what you can to get educated on it while you still can. Document what's going on. A lot of people think that if they just get up there and they tell the truth and they're sincere, that they're going to get the result that they want, and that's not reality. So anything that they can do for photographs, for recordings where it's applicable, you can't record everywhere, but where it's applicable, taking notes, having dates, sharing things with other people, which is really hard to do, right? A lot of the people that are in this situation don't want to tell other people, but having that support system, and then maybe one day those witnesses in court may make the difference. So it's kind of getting legally and mentally prepared for what you're about to face, and making sure that when you meet with that attorney, that you have a very good feeling about that attorney, because that can be an expensive mistake too. And people don't listen to their gut. If you're meeting with that attorney and you feel like they are not hearing you, if you feel like they are anything like your abuser, then that is not the situation that you want to be in. You need to find somebody that you're comfortable with.
Such good advice. So we're going to take a short break right now. Domestic abuse survivors experience a lack of trust in the divorce and legal systems in place to protect them. Research shows that many report re-traumatization in court and reported that legal professionals verbally threatened them, mocked them, did not give them a chance to speak in court, exaggerated the survivor's faults in court, and provoked them to elicit emotional reactions. In other cases, divorce professionals may be the first point of contact for survivors with the ability to help if they recognize the signs. The Divorce Coalition is a nonprofit organization created to change this experience for abuse victims and survivors through education and awareness of divorce professionals. For more information, go to www.divorcecoalition.com, and please support us by making a tax-deductible donation at www.divorcecoalition.com/donate-now. And now back to the show. So I have a couple more questions, Penny. First of all, are there any options for support for the domestic violence survivor during this process, other than, the lawyers giving of their own time, which is great, but do you know of other support for them?
Absolutely. There's organizations all over. So in North Carolina, in Mecklenburg County, there's Safe Alliance. In Union County, there's there's a million different programs that I could list out by name. But in Union County, it's Turning Point. So every kind of area has their place that is designed specifically for it, where there's no judgment. They are happy to help in any way that they can, whether that be sometimes in the form of legal representation. But honestly, one of, I think, the most beautiful things is that in a lot of these organizations, there's a person, a volunteer, that's willing to just come to court and sit with the victim there in court. It may seem like a small thing, but somebody's giving up their time. They just wait all day in court. Maybe somebody comes up, maybe they don't. But that just sitting there, and they're not allowed to say anything on their behalf. They're not really a part of the proceedings, but it's just having that presence there is huge for people. There is, in a lot of jurisdictions as well, there are reduced filing fees. There's not, at least in North Carolina, a filing fee for a domestic violence protective order the way there would be for other causes of action, because people recognize they don't want finances to be the hurdle. It's just that, we also have to have money to run things. So I think that there are cost savings places. There are self-help centers that can help you and at least give you the forms on what you're supposed to file, and people that are there that are willing to support you along the way.
Yeah, we have a organization called Women's Space. I don't know if it's national, but it's an amazing organization that helps people who are dealing with these types of situations. Now, what additional support would be helpful that doesn't exist right now?
Yeah, I've thought there's a couple of big ones. I wish that there was a housing situation, and there is in some places, right? There would be a shelter or a place where people can live. But those can be for people that have come from all walks of life. They're often crowded. They're limited. Not many of them have the ability to house families, and that can be a huge deterrent for people. It's one thing for the individual, but what if you've got a child or children with you? So I've always thought, and I know that there are people that have tried to do this and have done it with some success, that there should be some house where there are lots of bedrooms, and that women can say, I'm coming and staying with my kids until I figure things out. I think that would be such a huge relief for people to know that basic needs are being met while they figure out all the rest. And I think it would be great if they got to pay it forward in some way and sponsored another woman in the future when they're able to. But that kind of basic needs being taken care of would be huge, because it's really hard when someone's thinking, I need to either pay my attorney or I need to put food on the table. Now, what do I do? Or I need to go interview for a job, but I also am going to have court for the next, several weeks out of the, the rest of the year. So that's a very difficult thing. So if they had a place where they could be physically safe and feel emotionally supported, I think that would go a long way. And then, like I said, just more attorneys providing pro bono work and representation. And again, there are some counties that do it well, some that don't have anything. But just if someone would know, I think it's unfortunate that constitutionally people are allowed to get a court-appointed attorney for crimes, depending on what it is, that they can get representation. But if someone is in a domestic violence situation or fighting for custody of their child or desperately seeking financial support, that is not the case. And that's a really hard thing for people to understand. They're like, but I want court-appointed counsel. And I'm like, and I understand that, but that does not apply to civil claims like it does for criminal.
Such a good point. I mean, it really does make sense, because if they need representation and they can't afford it and a crime has been committed against them, they don't get representation, which
That's right.
That would be something that we would really love to have. So
Absolutely.
Thank you for bringing that up. Can you share any success stories or examples of how divorce professionals have helped domestic violence survivors during the divorce process?
Yes. Oh my goodness. So many things. And I think they range from the kind of larger to smaller, on a larger scale. At least in our county in North Carolina, there's an annual event, and it's gone on for years, where the female attorneys and female physicians in the area band together to do a fundraiser for Safe Alliance, which is the organization that helps people in the domestic violence situation, including legal representation. And so that's something where and I've been a part of, certainly in years past, where you get to meet with other professionals, all with the mindset of trying to raise funds for something that we know is so desperately needed. So those are moments and opportunities where you see people really working together. And like I said, attorneys and physicians that may not overlap in any other situation, working together with that common goal. And then there are the smaller things. There are the ones where, at least in our office, when we have a new attorney, we say the way you're going to learn and give back quickly is you're going to take on some of these cases. And they volunteer their time through, in this situation, Safe Alliance, sometimes other organizations in the other counties we're in. And they go and we mentor them, and we're there with them, and we make sure that they're doing a good job. But it's amazing when they win their first case and it's in a situation where they really felt passionate about it and they feel like they made a difference. And so it's a huge learning experience for them and a win for them. And my goodness, for someone to get really good quality representation at no cost, that's certainly a win there for the client.
Penny, that is amazing. It's so great that you do that. I don't know how many law firms do that, but that is something that is such a great service to people in your
community. And it's like I said, I mean, it's not, we're doing it because it feels good to do it. But like, I look at it like there's no other way that our new attorneys are going to get this great experience and hands-on and in the court, and in a way where there's a lot at stake, but it also is a straightforward issue. We're not talking about all kinds of, dollars and cents and business valuations and experts. We're talking about right and wrong. And then they go in there, they're very focused, they're very motivated. Like I said, you come out of law school and you've got this energy and this passion, and it really is good for everyone that's involved, I think. And there are, like I said, lots of other firms that do it as well, in different and varying capacities. But I think it's wonderful when we can work together in that way.
That's amazing. I love that. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
I think that an important thing, kind of talking about new attorneys and learning to do this, I learned an important lesson when I first started taking on these cases, and I was doing a case through Safe Alliance and representing a pro bono client. And the first time that she scheduled an appointment with me, she did not show up. And I was like, okay, things happen. And then we rescheduled, and then she didn't show up again. And now my irritation is there, and my privileged, entitled self thought, how rude. I am representing her for free and she is taking time on my calendar and I have to bill my hours and I'm doing this and not getting credit for it. And I can't believe she can't even show up to the appointment. And I'm sure I said some things to that effect to my paralegal. And then the client finally did come in and I met with her. And I have never felt so small as when I said to her, this is the third time we've scheduled the appointment. Are you having difficulty getting to these appointments? Because we really need to be prepared for court and I'm all business and I'm focused on what needs to get done. And she looked at me and she said, I'm so sorry, but I have to catch 2 buses to come to your office. And the first time I did not have enough money for it. The second time I did, but the bus was late. So I missed the second bus and that's why I didn't come. And I felt about the size of, a quarter. Did not feel great. And it had not occurred to me until that moment that it's not as simple as if I do something good, if I put it out there and I'm willing to represent somebody for a few hours and go to court, that's going to solve all the problems. This person has a million other problems that she's got to deal with. And then that taught me the first thing I do is if I'm taking on one of those cases is I say, what's going to be best for you? Should we meet, in person? Do I need to come, and I don't want to go into someone's home, but do we need to meet somewhere that's closer to you? Do we need to do it by email? Do we need to do it by Zoom? Like you've got to be more aware of the challenges that they're facing and how it might impact the work that you're doing. And that's a story that I tell a lot of the new attorneys. Don't make assumptions about why someone is behaving in a certain way in the case. They're facing a lot more than you're going to know or ever know.
Absolutely. There is so much going on for these people that we make assumptions. You can't do that. And so that's a great example of something that us as divorce professionals can take away and really empathize with. So
yeah, and to not assume that, and I'm not just talking about people that are struggling financial. I mean, you might see somebody that is very affluent and you've seen them in your circles and maybe they're at fundraisers, but you don't know what's going on for them. I know this, like that domestic violence can touch anyone and anywhere in any place in life and in the world. And so not even making assumption about the client that is very well dressed, that client may have no access, as I said earlier, to any of the accounts, any of the information, may have to beg and borrow for every dollar that she's able to spend. And even if she was able to spend freely, that doesn't mean that overnight her entire life did not change. So it's just not making assumptions and asking the question and meeting them where they are.
Great advice. You've been a wealth of information and experience. And I so appreciate, Penny, you taking the time to speak to us today. It's really been wonderful. And do you want to share where people can get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. If they go to sodomalaw.com, so that would be SODOMALAW.com. Not only can they reach us as attorneys there, and each of us has a profile and you can find a way to connect with us individually, but what we really do well at Sodoma Law is provide resources and information. So you will find updated and current blogs. You'll find an archive of blogs if you want to do a deep dive. You'll find things like a child support calculator if you're trying to kind of just get some quick information. Some of the things will be state specific, but other ones won't be. They'll be just good general information, like, things you should consider if you're going to court, reasons why you should consider mediation. Those are going to be things that apply across the board. So we really do try to have that information. And of course, one of the things we have is what we call our domestic violence handbook. And it's just a real quick kind of one pager where it talks about things to consider, things that you can do to plan and prepare in advance, and reaching out for help and not being ashamed or embarrassed to do so.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. So to my audience, thank you for being with Penny and myself on this episode of Divorce Coalition Live. If you would like to listen to this episode again, you can find the link at divorcecoalition.com live show tab. All of Penny's information will be available in the show notes. And we have a special gift for you, a free ebook called Stop Condoning Domestic Violence. And you can get that at www.divorcecoalition.com divorcecoalition.com/stop-condoning-ebook. I so enjoyed being your host today. I'm Jill Kaufman again, and you can get in touch with me at info@divorcecoachjill.com or www.divorcecoachjill.com. You can find the Divorce Coalition at divorcecoalition.com, and please like and share our Instagram page at Divorce Coalition page. Join us in the fight to change an abuse survivor's divorce journey. Stay tuned next Thursday at 9 a.m. Eastern for another episode of Divorce Coalition Live. Until next time, help us spread the word that divorce needs to change to create a more supportive and less traumatic divorce experience.